You're listening to the Doctor Is In podcast. This is the show where you get the best tips, tricks, and nutritional hacks to help you and your family get healthier. You'll also hear what works and what doesn't work so you don't have to waste your time and money. All right, let's get started.
Hello, I'm Dr. Tony Martin Jr.
And I'm Dr. Tony Martin Sr.
And this is the Doctor Is In podcast, and this is episode 111. Now, you're back from holidays.
Yep.
Got some vitamin D.
Big time.
I always kind of think that I could do this on my own, that I don't need you at all, and then you're holding this whole podcast thing back. But when you were gone and I did it on my own, it's not that easy to do, surprisingly.
It's hard to talk to yourself, isn't
it is. I made sure that I was ready to go. And anyways, I'll no longer discount your role in the Doctors In podcast.
Okay, I want a raise.
What we thought we would do today is talk about something that we get asked a lot in emails, and I know this is something that you get asked a lot in your clinic every day, and that has to do with osteoporosis. So today we're going to talk all about osteoporosis. Now, the medical industry, really the whole profession, big pharma, everybody, they did a great job blaming calcium. They really framed calcium as the boogeyman for osteoporosis, right? Yep. And, the dairy industry jumped on board, and, like milk gives you strong bones. And, they put a lot of money into getting people to think if you want healthy bones, you need to take more, you need your intake of calcium. Except there's a big problem with that.
Yeah.
Countries that consume the most amount of dairy also seem to have the highest levels of osteoporosis. The point is this: there's a lot more that goes into making healthy bones than just simple calcium intake. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about all things osteoporosis. We're going to really try to break down all the different ways that people can end up with osteoporosis, because there are a lot of different ways that people can end up with osteoporosis. But the fact of the matter is, it is really a silent killer for a lot of people, right? What ends up happening a lot of time for people near the end of their life is they fall, they break their leg, their hip, and that's really, unfortunately, the beginning of the end.
Yeah,
and a lot
they
of
don't recover from that.
No, exactly. And osteoporosis goes hand in hand with falls. It goes hand in hand with bones breaking when they shouldn't, and they don't heal well. There's a lot. This is really a big issue that, unfortunately, you think in a modern society that we have today that something like bone loss would be going away, but that's not the case at all.
Yeah. Because we're using more calcium than ever, right?
Well, everything's calcium fortified.
Yeah. From your milk to cereals to foods are calcium fortified. Obviously.
Yeah, it's more complicated than that.
More complicated than that, yeah.
All right, so let's talk about a couple of things here. First of all, I think the one thing that, we want to stress is that your bones are really part of, they don't operate in a vacuum, right? They're not just sitting there and not being affected by other organs. Bones are highly tied in with your soft tissue, your muscles. One of the major causes of debilitation as somebody ages also is sarcopenia, right? Which is extensive muscle loss.
Yeah. And you think of it just like what you're saying about bone, that people just see it as, they don't even look at it as an organ. But when you think of bone marrow, when you think of like what we look at the clinic all day long is, we look at blood, and you look at red blood cells. Your bones create blood, right? Your bone marrow is one of the primary sources of your blood. And so when you think of how important, like when you say that, it's not just the bone. You look at it, it's not just a bone. It is a living organism. It really is.
Well, and if somebody has, and this is interesting, because if somebody has osteoporosis, and as you mentioned, it's so vital in so many different functions in our body, they don't just have osteoporosis. It's an indication that their health is decreasing, as you mentioned, because the bone is intertwined with so many systems. Like, for example, if somebody has osteoporosis, they usually have sarcopenia. Now, They may not have a diagnosable sarcopenia, but they've lost a lot of muscle mass. Their legs, as they age, loses a lot of strength. You know, one of the big issues that a lot of seniors have is their legs are really weak.
Yeah.
They lost so much muscle mass, they just don't have the strength, the muscle mass.
They have tightness, but not strength.
Exactly. And so, that becomes
and
a real
flexibility, and they can't get off the floor. I always remember that test that I think you showed me one time, that if you can't get off the floor on your own.
Yeah, it's
an indicator of your
mortality, all-cause mortality.
Right?
Yeah, it's a great test to see how well somebody.
And you're not getting off the floor unless you have strong muscles and strong
that's right.
bones.
And a little bit of flexibility and all those things have to go in. And that's a big thing is the ability to get up off the floor, but it's amazing how many people lose that ability to move around. And it's a combination of stuff, but sarcopenia or muscle loss, unfortunately, bone loss and muscle loss are osteoporosis getting all the attention because there's drugs for it. But sarcopenia, I mean, there's no reason for sarcopenia today. There really isn't. Between what we know about lifting weights, resistance exercises, and protein consumption, there's really no reason why the average person should get sarcopenia, but yet it's very, very common.
Yeah.
Very common. And with osteoporosis, so here's another issue. And we're going to do a future podcast on this because it's really fascinating if you look at all the things that happen as we age. And there's a term that you and I like to use called the anorexia of aging. And we'll talk about that in a future episode. But one of the things that happens as we age, we hit that 40-year-old mark, and every one of us start to lose about 0.5% of our bone mass every year. We're already working against the clock to begin with. Then we'll list a whole bunch of things here that we can do in a day that will just make that worse, and just our inability to replace that bone that's lost. Yeah. And that's why we're seeing really an epidemic of osteoporosis today. But again, that can be applied to muscle as well. So let's talk about that. Now, before we get into the different complex causes of osteoporosis, you have an interesting observation in terms of men and women, the differences that you see.
Well, look, I mean, it's striking. And I think, the Martin Clinic, we've always sort of, I don't want to say pride ourselves, but we're cause and effect people, right? So if if the vast majority of people, I think it's 95 to 5% get osteoporosis are women versus men, then there's a clue there. If it's happening to women, and usually menopausal or postmenopausal women are the ones that are the vast majority of them are the ones that get osteoporosis. Well, there has to be a link between hormones and bones and bone density, right? There just has to be. And there is, because, again, at the clinic, our motto at the clinic is we don't guess, we test. And we look at progesterone levels and estrogen levels in women on a daily basis. And, because we're so interested in hormonal balance and how's your hormones, right? You got hormones? It's a question, But if you think that osteoporosis it's not just strictly for women, but it's mostly women. And it's not because women don't go to the gym. I mean, today women are much more active than they used to be.
Definite hormonal component to the health of bones.
And I've never seen an exception to this. I've never seen an exception to it. I've never seen a woman that gets osteoporosis that isn't low in progesterone.
Yeah, and that's interesting, right? Because that's something that is chronically low for a lot of people that you see. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we hear about this in emails from people that, and so, which again shows you the hormonal component to osteoporosis. So one of the things, and we'll talk about this at the end, is what you can do, to kind of protect your bones would be a progesterone, like a bioidentical type of progesterone. And we'll talk about that at the end of this episode here. But one of the other reasons, and this is interesting, and, we wrote a newsletter about this maybe about 3-4 weeks ago on how a majority of women are not even getting the recommended daily amount of protein. So not only is there a hormonal component, but women in general don't get enough protein. For whatever reason, they've been scared off from protein, and they just don't get enough. And proteins make up about 20 to 30% of people's bones. Most people don't realize that.
Yeah. You need those amino acids.
It's a big component of bones. And if you're not getting enough, most people don't even get the recommended daily amount. And that government, number that's given to us is low. Every study that they do in seniors that doubles the RDA, increases leg strength, increases lean mass tissue. So, protein is essential. It is so important, and we see this all the time. Women just don't get enough protein. Now, a lot of men don't get enough protein as well. This goes across the board. Yeah. But women seem to get less in general. And I think, that study was looking at how a majority of the women over the age of 12 don't get enough protein. And it's true. If you look at young teen girls, because, you analyze diets all the time, young teen girls don't get enough protein.
No.
They're just not eating enough. They're not getting enough.
Well, and you see it too, because we talk about this all the time. But, at the end of the day, nutritionally, and women are usually much more clued in to their health than men are, unless a man's at the gym and he's really watching himself. But most women are very, very interested in their health. But what they bought is the lie of nutrition. And
there's a lot of conflicting information about protein.
Yeah, and, you go on the internet and you get people that are almost religious about, don't eat meat and don't eat eggs and be careful. And, I always tell people, well, look, nutritionally, you better be getting your protein. And if you think you're going to get all your protein from the plant kingdom, you've got
and the
something
quality
coming.
Of protein, right? There are pea protein is a good source of protein, but I'll tell you, it ain't beef.
No, it ain't beef. It just isn't.
There is something, and this is another thing that we'll talk about after we could talk about that right now just to continue with this, is, one of the key components for healthy bone as well, and most people don't realize this, is creatine. Yeah. And that's found in red meat, right? You need that for healthy bone, and a lot of people just don't get enough of even something as simple as creatine. But, what we tell people when it comes to protein consumption is, you got to think of protein as your retirement account. In Canada, we have RRSPs, right? You're depositing in your RRSP account, because a lot of times the protein consumption that we have today, we don't really notice in a sense, right? But when you don't deposit into that protein bank, you pay for it on the back end of your life big time. Yeah. Your muscles are nowhere near where they should be, so you're atrophying faster, you're getting sarcopenia faster, your bones are paying the price. So you have to look at protein, and it's, there's nothing magical about eating a little bit more protein every day. There are some body composition stuff, and if you're lifting weights, you got to eat protein. But you have to think of protein as well as your retirement account. You have to be eating it, because, if you're not stimulating protein synthesis, if you're not stimulating muscle growth, you're eating muscle for energy, you're breaking down muscle, and that just makes it so much rougher on the back end. Every study that has seniors eating more protein shows a benefit.
Yeah. Yeah.
If somebody is diagnosed with sarcopenia and osteoporosis and they increase their protein consumption quite a bit, it's amazing to see the difference. Yeah. Protein is one of the big reasons why people have problems with their bones. It's one of the leading causes of why that we see so much of this issue. Now, let's talk about another big problem when it comes to osteoporosis that very few people think about, and that has to do with your gut. The health of your gut really determines how healthy your bones are going to be when you age. Yeah. And the interesting thing about the gut, as I talked about on the podcast last week, it doesn't mean that you have digestive symptoms necessarily. If you have chronic low-grade inflammation in your gut, your bones won't be healthy.
Yeah, well, you're not absorbing, first of all.
Yeah,
right?
There's a massive malabsorption issue.
Yeah.
That's a big issue.
You need real good microbiome. You need tremendous good flora in your gut to pick up. Well, think of I just give you an example, think of vitamin D. Vitamin D is, it's absorbed, right? It's absorbed on the skin, but it's synthesized in your gut. It's a hormone. Vitamin D is really not a vitamin. It's more of a hormone, and you need to have good digestion. It's fat soluble, first of all. And when you think that most women, and I just say this, they don't eat fat, so they're scared of fat because fat's going to make me fat, and I can't eat a piece of red meat with fat around it. I can't have saturated fat. I can't have butter, whatever. But vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. You just cannot have healthy bones without vitamin D.
No, and then everybody's scared of the sun,
Yeah.
right? So it all compounds that issue. And one of the early warning signs that the medical community had about the importance of gut health when it came to bone health had to do with the side effects of antacids, right? Chronic antacid use, one of the side effects of that is weak bones.
Yeah.
So, you live on Tums or you live on Nexium and all these different types of antacids, and the end result is bone fractures. So, again, because they affect, when you start to suppress how your digestive system's supposed to work, one of the end results is osteoporosis.
Yeah.
But your bones are a reflection of your health in a lot of ways. They really are.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it this way. How could somebody be healthy when their bones are underperforming? When they're just like, they got osteoporosis. That's a physiological event that's happening in their body that has caused their bones to break down. So it's hard to say I'm healthy, but I got osteoporosis, because that, again, it doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It's connected. So that tells you, okay. And this is another thing, and this is kind of a pet peeve of ours, but osteoporosis is a diagnosis, but it's not really. It's like anemia.
Yeah.
Right? It's like anemia. Anemia, people get diagnosed with anemia. Well, anemia is a symptom, really. It's like, what's causing the anemia?
Yeah. Why?
It's like osteoporosis. I've been diagnosed with osteoporosis. Why? That's really your bones crying out because there's something else going on in your system.
Yeah,
right? Your bones are indicating that there's something going on in your system. What is it? Are you chronically not getting enough protein? Are you protein malnourished? Is there a problem with your digestive system? So when somebody says, I got osteoporosis, I mean, we talked about this. Your first reaction is, well, why is that? Why do you have osteoporosis? What's going on physiologically that your bones are breaking down in order to help you stay alive? What's going on, right? Yeah. So, we talked about protein. We talked about gut inflammation. So you think of all the things that can damage your gut can eventually cause osteoporosis. And I'll tell you, we're putting together that course right now on leaky gut and for digestive. And the more we learn and the more we read studies, it is amazing the impact that gut. I mean, we always talk about gut and health, but I mean, even we're blown away by how much the gut matters for every aspect. For example, this is another thing here, how the gut is indirectly tied into bone health. 90% of your serotonin is made in your gut, which is a neurotransmitter, right? Yeah. So 90% of it, a neurotransmitter, is made in your gut. Well, a study has shown, which is interesting, that serotonin-gut relationship might actually affect the health of your bones. So serotonin, what they found in a study is that there's a definite counteraction going on when you have a problem with the serotonin production in your gut. Your gut is directly tied into the health of your bones. No
Incredible.
Question.
Yeah.
No question, absolutely.
So, like in terms of, we'll talk about this at the end of what to do, but when you think about it, the idea of taking probiotics, right, again, here's another reason to take it. More important to take that than to take calcium, right?
Yeah, because you're not even going to get the calcium absorption.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things, right?
And that's just it. And let's talk about that. So we talked about protein. We talked about gut issues. Mm-hmm. Another big problem.
Hormonal issues.
Issues. Yeah, exactly. So we talked about hormonal issues as well. And another thing is that, there are two things that are found in a lot of foods that contain calcium that kind of offset the ability to get that calcium from food, but it doesn't necessarily matter. But those are, like oxalates and phytates and all those things, right? They bind and they make them almost unusable. Grains have a lot of them. So, I mean, there are a lot of components when it comes to, in the olden days, it's like, I got osteoporosis. Oh, just take more calcium. And then, oh, here's a drug that's going to give you more calcium.
Yeah, build bone, right?
Boy, I'll tell you, that has got to be one of the most narrow views on bone health. Yeah. Just take calcium, right? Just absolute take calcium, and that's going to fix your problem. So now,
and another thing too, just on calcium, look, I like calcium. You need calcium. You certainly want calcium in your food. But I never liked it as a supplement because, first of all, it never gets delivered. It's almost like calcium never gets to the final place where doctors want it to end up. They want it to end up in your bone, but it ends up in your bloodstream. It actually does more harm than good.
Yeah, it calcifies your blood vessels, right? And that's the thing. It's like you can't just say to a pill, all right, target the bones. Yeah. Let's ignore calcium everywhere else. Let's just shove it in the bones. But again, it doesn't matter. There's a homeostasis that has to occur. There's a balance.
And there's a lot of other things that go along with that for, we talked about some of them in absorption.
Well, why don't you talk a little bit before we go through all the things that somebody can do to help their bones. Talk a little bit about phosphorus.
Well, phosphorus is very much prevalent in the soil today because of the, it's in the plants, it's in the antidote to phosphorus, which breaks bone down, by the way, is magnesium, right? And magnesium's not in the soil. And so you get an overabundance of phosphorus. When you think of sodas and, all the packaged goods has a lot of phosphorus in it. And again, not that phosphorus on its own is bad, but if it's in too much of a ratio compared to the magnesium and even your sodium and these things have to be in good ratios in order for and the other thing that happens too is that I've often said this, your body's smart. If you're acidic because you've got a bad diet, full of sugar, full of crappy carbs that we talk about all the time, your body that's an acidic diet, right? It's very acidic. So now your body in the tissue is trying to make you alkaline. So guess where it'll take the calcium from? Your bones. So you got a bad diet.
Yeah, because calcium is tightly regulated.
Yeah.
Right? If you have your parathyroid glands,
yeah.
So if you need calcium in your blood, you take it from bone. And unfortunately, even if your bones are starving, your body would rather protect the balance of your blood vessels than your bones. So it's constantly stealing it from the bones.
Yeah. And so you want to have an alkaline diet. Well, what's an alkaline diet? Well, I'll tell you what an acidic diet is, and everything else is alkaline. The acidic diet is the diet that we eat today. High vegetable oils, processed foods. I really loved the podcast last week when you were talking about those emulsifiers and how they are. Imagine how acidic that is.
Well, and unfortunately, emulsifiers are in everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, which again just reiterates the importance of probiotics.
Yeah.
I mean, every once in a while I'll read an article by somebody saying that, you don't need probiotics, and man, it just...
What planet are they?
Yeah, it just, it's...
So, that pH is very important because, it's always important in your health, your pH. But remember what is acidic. It's your packaged goods full of sugar. The sugar and your crappy carbohydrates are your packaged goods. And that's what if you get back an alkaline diet, people think, oh, meat is acidic. No, it's not. Meat's not acidic. Sugar is acidic.
Yeah,
they always had this idea that, I don't know where it came from, that meat is acidic, eggs are acidic, milk is acidic.
Well, and I think the important thing is, does it make you acidic?
Yeah,
right?
That's the point.
That's the point. It's not whether or not something is acidic.
Yeah, an orange is acidic, and so is lemon.
Yeah, and
is there
that's what people
better
say.
For
well,
you?
Those are very acidic. Yeah, but they don't make you acidic,
and that's their alkaline.
And that's the distinguishing factor. Like a lot of times they're like, oh, that's an acidic food. Well, what does that food really do to you, right? Yeah. And that's the important thing. All right, so we're already out of time, but let's just run down quickly some tips, to counteract those main.
So ladies, progesterone.
All right, so hormonal is a big issue, so you counter that with progesterone. And when we talk about progesterone being an issue, we're really talking about it in relation to estrogen. So a lot of women are estrogen dominant because they either have too much estrogen or not enough progesterone, or really a combination of both. So that's one.
It's an imbalance, right?
That's one. And then we talked about protein. So you got to get more protein.
Yeah.
And we like, we have that bone broth protein that we like.
And I'll tell you why bone broth is so good, too. Just because we're talking bone, think about it.
Yeah, all the collagen.
All the collagen, all the minerals. Like you've got,
tons of magnesium.
You've got about 80 minerals that come out of that bone, the bone broth. It's such a complete food. I tell people you can live on bone broth because it's got your amino acids, it's got tremendous protein, collagen. The matrix of your body is collagen. Your bone. If you broke bone down, you'd see collagen, right? It's so it knits collagen, sort of it knits your bones together, and that is in our bone. I love bone broth. It's
yeah, and it's easy to digest, which is why a lot of people like it. So when it comes to protein, get more protein, lift weights,
big time,
build muscle. Right?
But look at osteoporosis, and I just it's just because women, if they run and walk, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No, there isn't. However, you
better be doing some weights.
Chronic running is catabolic. It eats your muscle. And anyways, that's another episode for another time. But all right, and now let's talk about counteracting leaky gut. Obviously, with probiotics, bone broth again, tremendous for leaky gut. It's got a lot of L-glutamine in it, so it's so good for that. Also, vitamin D. Most people don't get enough vitamin D, so you need vitamin D. And the other one that is key is, as you mentioned, is magnesium. Yeah. So many people are chronically deficient in magnesium.
And we like citrate, magnesium citrate.
Yeah, there's a few that are good, but we like citrate. And, a lot of people get results taken before bed. It helps them calm down and, sleep
Very
better. But it's a tremendous thing. All right.
If you got achy bones, just to tell you something. If you got achy bones, I see this in the office all the time. I had a young lady in there today with achy bones. I said, well, you know what you're missing? Vitamin D. Your bones will scream at you. You got achy bones, you got low vitamin D.
And really, that's the takeaway point, is that you have to think of your bones as just a different biomarker. Really, it's a different biomarker that something else is going on in your body. And osteoporosis in itself is very complicated. There's a lot of ways that you can end up with osteoporosis. So we just, we just wanted to answer that common question we get about osteoporosis. So again, we want to thank you for listening to this episode. If you have any questions, you can email us at info@martinclinic.com. If you're not a newsletter subscriber, we talk about a lot of this in our newsletters. Just go to martinclinic.com, sign up for our newsletters. And also, if you're listening to this in Apple Podcasts or iTunes, if you can leave us a quick review, we would really appreciate it. Again, thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in again next week.